If you want to go for controversy, just ask me how I feel about it, mate, because I'll really cut loose. They are a ruthless bunch of lying individuals, charlatans, who came into my house with my family, my wife, and they lied through their teeth.
How do you put that in context for us? You look at it and you go, like, this is not a good look.
I lived it and it was bloody horrible. I want the world to know about Rodger Muller, and I want them to know about Al Jazeera. There's some people I want blood from just about.
We want to sort of, I guess, take the audience through this story, which is just so massive. But before we get to the controversy, let's start with just, I guess, your growing up as a Queenslander. From what I've read in this book, which I'll just hold up to the camera, it's called Breaking the Silence, and I'm 90% through it. It seems like your life started out as quite an awesome Australian, idyllic postcard sort of lifestyle.
I've been very, very fortunate. And I mean, as most Queenslanders, I think I've grown up in one of the best times in history. You could leave your doors open. You could leave your windows open. Nobody robbed anything from you. Today, the world's changed pretty dramatically in more ways than I could ever describe. We'd want to do an interview for 2 days to cover that.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking when I was thinking about the way you grew up and how you've become so passionate and involved in politics. Is that part of it? Is that do you think that you've seen a massive change in the way things were and the way things are? Is that sort of a fire in your belly?
I think probably my grandson right now is the fire in my belly, because I want our country to be the way it was when I grew up. I know it's never going to be the same, but the principles and the philosophies about the family unit, I just think we're overgoverned. I think there's too many rules and regulations. I think the world has gone off a cliff, but we've done it a few times through history. You know, think of the Roman Empire. It was a great place, but it fell apart. But getting to the crux of your question, I'm driven because I like the truth. I like people to say and do what they say they're going to do. And it's a pretty simple philosophy, be that in business, be that in family life. I love my family. I've been married to Deb for 38 years, and I'd say she saved my life on a few occasions and one particular big occasion. But I feel very, very honoured.
And is that what? So tell us about your political career. You were a businessman. You sort of got involved in politics. Let's just kind of get through this journey to getting into One Nation.
You know, we'd moved to the Sunshine Coast. The local councillor up there was I'll call him a rogue. There was things that he did that I didn't like at all, and I decided to run for politics. And, you know, that's what got me fired up. It was different back in those days. I ran for local government in 2000. I won. I ran again in 2004 and I won again. And then I left halfway through that term to run for the Liberal Party. They asked me to run for them. Against a Labor sitting minister, and I ran and I won, and I continued to win for quite some time because I enjoy helping people. I mean, I believe in fair play. I think everybody should have a go. Mightn't agree with you, but you got a right to have a say as much as anybody else does. And I think that's what probably got me into trouble. You know, when you go up against big money and you go up against big business, things change dramatically.
Yeah. What happened with, I guess, why did you leave the Liberal National Party, the LNP, wasn't it, to One
absolutely.
Nation? What happened there? What was the transition and what got you into the Pauline Hanson fold?
My breakup with the LNP was very straightforward. It was relating to medical cannabis. I had a lot of mums coming to me that they had kids that had disabilities, and it was really, really scary seeing that they had to go to the black market to buy a drug that was assisting their children have some sort of normality in their life. And I took this to the party and they thought it was funny. I don't think it's funny. You know, I don't think it's funny when it gets down to kids with epilepsy, when it gets down to kids that have got tremors, when it gets down to people's lives being affected through a medication that they weren't able to get legally on the normal market, which they should be. I mean, opiate-based drugs is what most people get prescribed in these areas, and they rip your guts apart. They actually kill people all over the world. And I think opiate-based drugs are one of the worst drugs you can ever get. They've got their place, of course, but medical cannabis is now proven to be a very normal, everyday, usable, assisting drug that is helping many, many people.
Where's the status of medicinal cannabis now?
But you can go to the chemist now. You go to your doctor, they'll give you a script. You can either get a herb, which is the flower itself, or you can get an oil, one or the other. The doctor will prescribe whatever he believes is best for you, and there's many, many different companies doing it. I believe there's 660,000 people using that product in Australia today. So I look at it like this. Nobody's ever died from taking medical cannabis. Put that up against how many people have died from taking opiate-based drugs. And when it gets back to the falling out with the LNP, there was a few things. That was the straw that broke the camel's back when they laughed at that and thought it was funny. I didn't think it was funny. But they also supported changing the rules for underage sex for girls and boys from, I think it was from 16 to 14 for anal sex. And I believe in God. I've got children, and I just think, why do we want any part of this? And, the party agreed to vote with the Labor Party on it, and I couldn't bring myself to voting for that. I just refused to vote. And I think I pissed a few people off by not doing that. I mean, if you don't follow the party lines, you're dead in the water at the next election. They will disendorse you. You're not going to be running for that particular party if you don't do as you're told. That's the real truth with the major parties in our country.
Don't you think that's why people have such little faith in politics? Because of that, in the sense that it's hard if you get an individual. We were talking to a few politicians now where individuals seem to kind of be coaxed into the party line.
Absolutely. I mean, parties, I don't hold it against them. They want people in the party that are going to want to win seats. That's what it's all about. It's about bums on seats at the end of the day. They don't care about your ability. They care about your electability. If you can get elected, you're going to go in there and be a puppet. Hopefully you're intelligent enough to represent people and have a passion for the job. But many people get in there and it becomes a career. They get paid a couple $100,000 a year, and you put up your hand when you're told to, and you vote for legislation you probably don't even understand. And
let alone
the cycle
with.
Keeps on going.
Yeah.
I mean, look at our country today compared to 25 years ago. Are we better off? Is power cheaper? Is water cheaper? Are you happy with the way crime is in our country? Can you go to the hospital anytime you like and be looked after? I mean, I think they're the things people need to start asking themselves, and, it gets down to them. If you vote for a party who, I'll just call them delinquents for the sake of a word, who are not running the economy appropriately, not running the planning processes appropriately, and not running our country appropriately, we've got a problem.
So then you've gone from LNP to One Nation.
Yep.
Do you think are they more in line with what you're saying? Are they less? Are they a party that doesn't have this problem?
Well, One Nation's got plenty of problems, as most parties do. I think it gets down to people. It gets down to the management of the organisation. I can pick holes in anything. We all make mistakes along a journey, but at that particular nexus in time, I looked at One Nation. They believed in all the stuff that I believed in. There's some unusual people involved in One Nation, but every party, there's some very unusual people involved. But the medical cannabis thing was the thing that Pauline came out and backed me on 100%. And at that time, I was leaving party, LNP. I was never going to be a Labor Party candidate. It was never going to happen, or a Greens candidate. But this is the vehicle that suited me at the time. In hindsight, I probably should have gone independent. I would have got re-elected again. I don't think it was about my role, about what I did, about what I delivered for people. I always did a pretty good job. And I'm not blowing my own trumpet, but if you don't do a good job, you don't get re-elected. And I got re-elected on numerous occasions. I got elected in 2000, 2004, 2006, 2009, 2012, 2015. That was when I got out of politics. So I got elected 6 times in a row.
Wow.
It's not a bad effort in that business. But I think generally today we don't have politicians in there, and I think we need everyday people. I think we need people who care about their families. I think we need business people that understand what it's like to be on the bones of your backside paying high interest rates to be able to cover the costs so you can employ a heap of people and keep their family fed. I mean, that's, when you've got a real heart, a real understanding, and you know what business is about and you know what helping people is about. I mean, nothing's perfect. Nobody's Mother Teresa. But I just think we could do a whole lot better than what we've got at the moment.
Do you think there's an effort to destroy small business at the moment?
Well, if they're not doing it on purpose, I'll tell you what's a hell of an accident, because how many businesses and manufacturing organisations do we actually have in Australia today? It'd be a good question to ask people, like, what do we do? We export iron, we export coal, we export gas. You take those three things out of the equation, I reckon we're stuffed. You know, you should have cheap electricity bills, and that way you don't have to subsidise anybody. We should have the cheapest electricity in the world. We sit on the biggest amount of coal just about on the planet, yet we export coal all over the whole world. We sell it to China, India, Japan, so they can have cheap electricity over there, but we're not allowed to use it after 2035. We're done with coal. So I don't get it. I don't know how that works.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of questions there. Let's tackle this big question, all right? So you've got elected 6 times in a row, and you're up to 2017. When did you say you joined the One Nation in 20?
On the 13th of January 2017. I remember the date really well.
Right, okay. Now, this is where it all sort of comes unravelled. Now, with the One Nation role, what was your role with that party? What was your actual position in the One Nation party?
I was a member of Parliament, so I was the only One Nation member of Parliament in the Queensland Parliament. I was the leader of the party in Queensland, and that was my role. I organised the 2017 election, working with the party itself. We achieved 23% of the primary vote in the 61 seats we ran in Queensland. That's the highest vote they've ever got. They've never had a higher vote than that. But the problem was we should have won a swag of seats, but the Liberal Party and the Labor Party preferenced each other, and they put us last.
Why is everyone so frightened of myself? Why is everyone so frightened of One Nation? And it's quite evident in this election, because the Libs now are preferencing One Nation below the Labor Party. Why? When I worked so well with them on the floor of Parliament.
Right.
Pretty straightforward. I mean, for two parties that hate each other, that never vote for each other, that demonstrate to the world that, you know, they're both, you know, at opposite ends of the pole, they preference each other in election to keep One Nation out of Parliament. Pretty straightforward. So what it says to me, they will do whatever it takes, whatever is necessary to destroy anybody who can break the nexus of the two-party system. And I mean, even with the Greens at the moment, the Greens have got the balance of power in the Senate, and you can see what's happening in our country. I mean, is it good or bad? History will tell us. But at the moment, I think Australia's in big trouble.
So the fall from grace that came, how did this start? I want to look at the human aspect of this. So your world is going pretty good. And for the people that aren't aware of this, I guess, this political scandal, there'll be people listening to this that have no idea what has actually occurred. So you're, I guess, sitting at home one night and you get wind of there's going to be an expose on a documentary on ABC that's released about you and your involvement with the American National Rifle Association, the NRA.
Yep.
And One Nation trying to procure money from the NRA. And it's a 2-hour, 2-night. Was it done over 2 nights?
Absolutely, it was done over 2 nights.
Done over 2 nights, 1 hour each night. And there's hidden cameras and it's a complete setup of you working with a guy called Rodger Mullins.
Yeah, Rodger Muller.
Muller.
Actually, I'll butt in on that bit because I want the world to know about Rodger Muller and I want them to know about Al Jazeera. They are a ruthless bunch of fucking lying individuals, charlatans, who came into my house with my family, my wife, and they lied through their teeth to say, we're from a group called Gun Rights Australia. And I'll wind back in a moment because I think you need to get this into context.
Sure.
I mean, to come into your home, to your family, and to do the hidden undercover camera stuff. I mean, and they got nothing out of my home, but it's the violation of my own home that really irks me. My wife, to put her in a position where they knew what they were doing. And I mean, the MEAA, I mean, they should shut down tomorrow because they actually gave
Who's the MEAA?
I think it's the Media and bloody Alliance.
The awards.
Yeah. Well, it's not the awards group. There's a particular group, I think it's called the MEAA, that they're in charge of all media in Australia. You've got to be a member of them to be a part of the media outlets.
I joined because I know we are strong when we are united, that we need to look after ourselves, our colleagues, and the integrity of our profession.
when you go out and you do interviews with people, you say, hello, my name's Steve Dickson. I'm from Channel 9. We're here to do an interview and we're going to talk about such and such today. This guy's come into our home with another lady and a cameraman, and under the pretense, how this came about, they met James Ashby down in Sydney. Rodger Muller did. So somehow, inadvertently, this guy who's an undercover agent paid by the Qatar government through Al Jazeera has met James Ashby down in Sydney at a One Nation function. I didn't know anything about it, never heard of him in my life.
And this is Rodger Muller, and he's working undercover
Absolutely.
as a Gun Rights Australia, which is a fake organisation.
100%. Well, we didn't know that at the time, and they'd been in existence for 3 years. Like, it was all pretty fair dinkum stuff. Like, you're a journalist. How we sit here today. I trust you. I've sat down at the table. You're a real journalist, but in 6 months' time, I find out you're an assassin, and I didn't leave the room. That's the analogy that I'll use.
And what was your professional background? Did you have any experience in undercover work, media, anything of that nature?
Not at all. I've run my own businesses my whole life and had a number of them. And when Peter rang, I was in the middle of setting up a dog food business.
This guy lied about who he is. He misled me. He misled my family. He misled James Ashby. I mean, I suppose it's par for the course for people that are unethical, that are charlatans. That's what they do. But to spend this sort of money, so they've met with James down in Sydney, and this guy's talking about guns. He's talking about Gun Rights Australia, the group that he represents. James has put him on to me because I've written a gun policy in Queensland, which is pretty straightforward. I shoot small arms and I shoot long arms. Grew up on a property and I've shot firearms all my life. I believe you've really, really got to be careful with guns. And our gun laws are pretty good. What I was looking to do is enhance them so they were actually even better, so that you had a licence that covered you for short arms, for long arms, and for historical weapons. Because at the moment, you've got to have 3 different licences, and it's a bit like a car licence. You know, you used to have an automatic licence, you had a manual licence, you had a motorbike licence, you had a truck licence. You had all these different licences. They're all in one now. That's one of the things that I wanted to do. I don't think it's that controversial. I think it's really smart. It's clean. Everybody can look you up at the drop of a hat. That was logical sort of stuff. That was the big change that I wanted to make with our gun laws in Australia. Rodger Muller, he's come with an agenda, of course, and that's okay. In hindsight, I can explain this really, really simply. He's trying to talk about automatic weapons and semi-automatic weapons, which we never even talked about doing anything like that. What they did do when I was in America, we were talking with the NRA people, of which Muller and Al Jazeera set up every single meeting. We didn't know the NRA. We had nothing to do with the NRA whatsoever. This meeting that Muller, when he hooked up with James Ashby down in Brisbane, put him on to me. He's called me. We've organised to have a meeting, and I think it was probably 6 or 8 weeks later when I could fit it into my diary. And I was meeting people like this every day. It wasn't new to me to meet some new people. They could be people from the Maritime Union. They could be people from the Farmers, Alliance. Could be anybody. Just normal people. It could be people in wheelchairs looking about disability. So he's come along. He's come to my house. My wife's made lunch for them. But she caters for people. We look after people that come to our house. Gone down into the backyard. We've shot a video relating to my policy on guns for Australia, or for Queensland, I should say.
Hey guys, Rodger Muller, GRA. Well, I've got a special guest today, Steve Dickson, who's the head of the One Nation Party here in Queensland and a Senate candidate. How you doing, Steve?
Absolute pleasure to meet you.
Lovely to meet you. So, Steve, can you tell me a little bit more about the One Nation gun policy?
Well, very straightforward. We are pro-guns and pro-people in this country owning guns.
We couldn't affect the gun laws in Australia anyway if we wanted to. That's just never going to happen.
Yeah.
So we've done this video. It's all mundane. He's put it up on his website. He sent me through a link. Going to have a look at this, spread it around. It's all fine. Didn't hear anything from Rodger Muller for a while. We went to dinner that night. I took him to dinner at the pub in the afternoon up at the Budrum Tavern, and it was all mundane. He'd left, gone on his way, and he said, listen, I go to America and I meet with the NRA, and the last time I went over there, I sat at a table with Donald Trump Jr. And mate, I'll be honest with you, I actually like Donald Trump. I think he can change a whole lot in the world. He's out of politics now, but at that particular stage, so this is 2008.
One Nation were big supporters of Trump. That's no secret.
I won money in the Queensland Parliament when I was a member of Parliament. I actually backed him and everybody else didn't.
Yeah.
And I think I won about $120 in $20 notes. I know it's old-fashioned, but I did. Anyway, moving forward, we had the interview, gone up to the pub. He's gone away, but he planted the seed. He said, I go over to America to this, I think it's called the American Sportsman's Awards dinner. And he said, I'd really love to get Pauline to come over there. You know, she's a senator in Queensland. I can get her to meet Donald Trump and, you know, they'll sit at the table with him and all that. And I thought, shit, that's really good. I wouldn't mind doing that myself. But, you know, flick that back to James, let them know. They've gone back and forward for a few months. Pauline couldn't go over there. And then the next drop was Stephen Andrews. He was a Queensland Member of Parliament for the One Nation Party, and he couldn't go because he's sitting in Parliament. So I ended up being the third drop to go over with James Ashby, to go over to the United States and to go to the Sportsman's Awards dinner to meet with people from the NRA, just to meet and greet them, you know, to get to know these people. I've gone from working in Parliament down in Canberra, we've gone straight to the Birdsville Cup. Then we've come home and we've landed at the airport. I think it was a Saturday. I've got my bags, gone straight home, cleaned everything out, laid down for about half an hour and then packed my bags, went down to Brisbane Airport, flew to Sydney, and we were off to LA the next morning at 5 o'clock in the morning. So that's the lead into the trip. So we're doing this bit of a drinking session out here at Birdsville. We've gone along, flown to LA, and fortunately we ended up, I think we had business class going over there and I was very grateful for that, but we didn't on the way back. And we were economy going from LA to Washington, DC. Muller and Co. picked us up at the airport, and I've only just read through this stuff again last night. I was actually shocked. The guy who picked us up in the car, and I haven't got his name in front of me, but I've sent it through to you, so maybe you can put that up. He armed the car with 15 cameras inside of the car. So none of this stuff's happening cheaply, and they've got another vehicle following us as well. So I know all this in hindsight after it's happened. So if we go to the Hyatt we were staying at, we paid for our own flights, we paid for our accommodation over there, just so that's clear to everybody out in the world. You know, we didn't get funded by anybody to go over there. We paid our own way. Anyway, we've rocked up. I've gone upstairs, unpacked my clothes, and habit of just living out of a suitcase. I've ironed my shirts and hung them up in the cupboard. That's the first thing I do whenever I go anywhere, so I'm kind of ready to go. And we went down to the restaurant, it's kind of restaurant pub right in front of the Hyatt, inside, and that's where Muller had lined up for us to meet with them. And I read about it last night. It was ironic when you relive it because I pushed this stuff to the side. I don't like it. I think it's horrible. It's one of those terrible parts of your life you don't want to experience. You know, I don't relive it every day because I lived it and it was bloody horrible. Anyway, we're down there with Muller and Co. and James Ashby and I and Muller and this lady, and I haven't got her name that I can think of it in my mind at the moment, but she was working with Rodger Muller. We spent $700 because I had to pay a third of the bill US drinking scotch that evening. We got out of there, I think, about midnight, but that's where this claims of $10 million and $20 million.
Is that the footage that you can see
about.
where they can film you from the road?
That's it. That's exactly
that restaurant
it.
on the side there?
When I read yesterday, it was ironic reliving this stuff. They'd actually gone into the Hyatt to organise to get that table right up against the window. So there's no mistakes in this stuff. This is all
it's very well coordinated and
clinically
choreographed.
coordinated, put together. So the cameraman's outside, they're all hooked up for sound inside. We didn't know any of this. We were oblivious to it. I mean, it was a very, very good undercover sting. Unethical as can humanly be in my mind. I'm not going to ever forget it, I think, until I go to the grave. But they've shot this video. They've got the stuff that they wanted out of it. I mean, you got three blokes that are on the piss. I mean, seriously, I drink a little bit. I'll have a couple of scotches every now and then, and I've been off it for 6 months, to be honest, so that's a good thing for me. But you drink that much alcohol, mate, you're talking shit. You really are. I mean, you're a bunch of blokes sitting at a table and Muller's peppering us with questions and he's asking us about, well, how much would it cost, to run an election campaign to be viable and win seats? And, we're talking about Clive Palmer spending $100 million on election campaigns. And I said, I reckon $10 million or so would, it'd probably win you a number of seats because it'd be pretty strategic if we had funding to do that sort of thing.
If One Nation could get $10 million, you'd pick up eight Senate seats.
That guarantees you balance of power. I mean,
Out of how many?
the whole government on the ball.
Anyway, I think James Ashby popped up and he said, $20 million, just to sure things. We'd do very, very well out of that.
So you're saying they clipped that so that it makes it look like you're asking or you're suggesting we should try and get that money to win?
We're drunk with Rodger Muller sitting at the Hyatt Hotel after flying from Australia, to Washington, D.C. It's a pretty long flight. I think it's 12 hours or so, the main flight, and then another 5 hours going to Washington. I mean, we were starved. Shouldn't have got on the grog. That's the real truth.
Is Rodger, is he, looking back, is he being manipulative in the sense of how, was he furnishing you with more drinks than he was drinking, or was he trying to stay in control, or was he drunk as well?
Mate, I honestly can't tell you. He might have been tipping it onto the floor. Who knows?
Right.
It wasn't something that I was visually looking at. I mean, I trusted the guy. I believed that he was everything that he said he was. But obviously, in hindsight, we can all look back in the rear vision mirror. It's easy. He wasn't. And, people have said to me, well, why didn't you know he had a camera? Well, he didn't have a camera on top of his hat shining it down on us or anything like that. This was very, very good undercover stuff. I mean, I suppose that's what liars and charlatans do. They're good at what they do. I mean, people who get in touch with older people on the internet and fleece them out of money, that's what they do. Criminals are criminals are criminals. Liars are liars are liars, and some of them are very good at it, some of them aren't. The ones that aren't end up in jail.
Yeah, well, so let's get this story done so we can dissect it. So then after that, you've gone to a few NRA meetings and you've gone to that congressional
Sportsman's Awards. Well, that was another drinking session. We've gone to that, and I remember we were walking home at like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. It might have even been later than that, but met some amazing people. Like, we did a lot of networking on that night. We got around. I wanted to meet Donald Trump.
Yeah.
That was probably my biggest driver of even wanting to go to America. I thought, I'm going to get to meet Donald Trump. Potentially, I could be sitting at the table with Donald Trump. How good would that be?
Yeah.
That didn't happen. We were up at the far back of the room. I think I understand from the stories that I've read that they were given 4 tickets, by the NRA. See, they were lying to them as well. But that's what they did. They wanted a course of action. They got us in the door, and then they used us to get in with the NRA, saying, the One Nation group from Australia, they support the existing firearms legislation that's already here, of which we did, and we still do to this day, or I do. That was where we were.
There's a scene in the documentary where Rodger Muller goes back to his hotel room and meets Peter Charlie. Is that in the same hotel room? Is that
I don't think so. I don't know.
He's working undercover for me, Peter Charlie.
Rog, there you go, mate. Very interesting.
I'm a reporter from Al Jazeera's investigative unit.
You think that might have been staged afterwards? Or?
Well, I was asking Rodger, and I was wondering why he wasn't staying in our hotel, and he said, I've stayed in different hotels and the meals are better at this one.
Right,
and he said,
okay.
I'm here, and it's a bit of excitement for me. He used to carry on about a whole lot of stuff.
Right,
but
so he wasn't staying in your hotel?
I don't think so. I can't tell you if he was or wasn't, because I never saw him besides when we actually met with him.
Right.
That was it.
Okay. And so in hindsight, I guess we're going to get to the other part of it, which is where they get you to a strip club to make even more, I guess, embarrassing footage. But before we get to that, so there is a lot of comments that you make in the documentary about, Muslims, about, the state of Australia.
We've been importing all those Muslims into Australia. We have 230,000 people coming in a year. Our population's only 25 million, and they're really dangerous people. And they're just breaking into people's homes with house with baseball bats and just killing people, basically stealing everything they own. Gangs. It is just, our country's going into chaos.
How do you put that in context for us? Like, because I look at it and you look at it and you go, shit, like this is not a good look, especially for someone who's in Parliament and someone who's a politician. You think, so it's going to be it's very hard to contextualize that. Even when I'm trying to play devil's advocate and watch it and say, I'm looking at this from the viewpoint of someone who got stitched up. There's parts of it where you go, far out, that's difficult to
Consume.
To
No, I
put
get
in
it.
context. So
I
try
can give you
here's
the
your
answer.
opportunity
I can
to
give you
do
the
that.
answer really, really quickly. I'm going to ask you 2 questions. Do you love your mother?
Yes.
What do you think of pedophiles?
I don't like them.
Okay, now I'm going to put it together, and you love pedophiles.
Yeah.
That's what I can have you saying. It's what you can do to people when you do cut and paste, and I've learnt lots about it now because I know I've had it done to me. What I was talking about, and I was being asked very simple questions, and we were talking with congressmen at this particular dinner that I think that's where they got the footage from, and I'm talking about an event that happened down in Sydney Melbourne to a very good friend of mine. He's an AFL player down there, he used to be, and he's a big developer down in the Melbourne region. He said to me, Sudanese people are coming into people's houses with baseball bats threatening to kill them. If you don't give you your car keys, you're dead. That's what was going on, and that's the context of what I was talking about. I said, these bloody people, and they were Muslim people, you know, they attached the Muslim word to it. There were Sudanese people who were doing this, and that's what I was referring to as part of the conversation we're having. Is it true? Absolutely it's true. Is it true even more so today? 100% it's true. You know, think of a 70-year-old lady who just got stabbed to death by a 16-year-old child in front of a 6-year-old girl here. He's been imported from overseas. That's the real truth.
A teenage fugitive in handcuffs.
What do you have to say to Violene White's family?
On the run for almost 2 days, but this afternoon police swarmed the 16-year-old's home and marched him down his driveway.
What do you have to say about what you and your friends did?
You know, we're not allowed to talk about these things because it's before the court, so I won't mention any names, but, mate, it frustrates me immensely that we're going down the path we're going down. I'm not a racist by any means. I've got a Korean daughter-in-law. I've lived in the Philippines. I've lived in Papua New Guinea for a while. I mean, people are people. We're all immigrants. We come from somewhere, but I called a spade a spade. That was the real truth of what's happening down in Melbourne, directly given to me by a really good friend of mine. And that was the context of what I was speaking about.
Yeah, I understand. We'll talk about that in a minute with the racist stuff because that's another issue Pauline and One Nation have with their image, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'll get to that later, but I don't want to digress from this story. So how did you end up in a strip club?
We were there for 7 days. I would have liked to have come home after 3, to be perfectly honest, because we just went from meeting to meeting to meeting. We got on the grog from when we got there. It was an every night sort of thing. We got on the grog the first night when we arrived, but as I explained, the $700 worth of scotch. See, I'm not a member of Parliament. I was the leader of the party in Queensland. I wasn't a member of Parliament at this particular stage at all. I was on the ticket to run for the Senate, and it hadn't been called yet. That was the next year. So we got on the grog that night. We went to the Congressional Sportsman's Dinner. We got on the grog again that night. It turned into a drinking session, and I had an issue going on at home at that particular stage, and I'm not going to go into it in a big way, but one of my family members was getting divorced, and that's very, very close to me, and it was affecting my wife, and I'm thousands of miles away in another country, and I'm not there to support him. So this probably helped me with my little drinking session that I'm going through. I'm not going to make excuses. I put the alcohol in my mouth. I got drunk. I think I was just dampening the senses while I was away from my family. I think I was dampening the senses because I didn't want to be there anymore. I'd done as much as I wanted to do in that first 3 days. I would have been happy to go home then. Anyway, Muller was buying us drinks, and he bought these drinks. I think they're called Fireballs. And James had a drink, and he only had a couple of sips out of it, and he got sick. And Muller organised for the driver to come and pick James up, take him back to the hotel. I drank probably a quarter to half of this Fireball. Oh, mate, I can't drink this. This is terrible. You know, just the worst drink I've ever tasted in my life. Anyway, James had gone home and I got a scotch. I liked drinking scotch at the time, and as I said, I think I'm dampening the senses a little bit. Drank the scotch, and we probably stayed there for another hour or so. It had been raining, and the next thing you know, we're off. And this is where it all got dicey with me, because not only was I under the weather from drinking, I don't know that somebody didn't put something in my drink. When I reflect now and I look at the footage of what happened, and it's got Steve Dickson hanging out of the car window, screaming at people in the street.
Steve Dickson starts to yell at women on the taxi ride home.
Australia! Australia! Hey, you look beautiful. Stunning.
haven't done that. You know, that's not normal. I remembered the strip club. It was a narrow building, 2 stories high. If somebody said to me, I'll pay you $1 million if you can tell me the name of that strip club you were at after the event, I couldn't tell you. I didn't remember. But we researched it and I found the name of it, got in touch with the guy who owned the club, all that sort of stuff. But we've gone to the strip club downstairs. It was just full of people. And I put my hand up. I've gone along to the strip club. Nobody put a gun to my head. I've gone along with him. I'm pretty pissy. And he's taken us upstairs. We went up a narrow set of stairs and it was a big open area. And there was a few people there and I just wanted to have something to eat, to be honest. And we ordered a steak sandwich, I remember, and some chips. And I remember really well going to the toilet because I was wobbling, you know, and it's not something that I remember. I don't put myself in this position. I've been involved in politics since 2000, not something that I would allow myself to do. But here, then, I did. No excuses for it. You know, I drank. Don't know that somebody didn't drug me, and I still, to this day, love to be able to prove it because Steve Dickson of that night, when I look at the footage of what occurred, it's not me. But I'm the guy on the picture. You know, the things you saw there, I don't remember a whole lot about the night, to be brutally honest. I remember going up the stairs. I remember getting the feed. We had a steak sandwich and chips. I remember Muller handing me bundles of notes, dollar notes, and I remember women coming over to me. I mean, that's my memory. And I looked at the videos because I had to watch it like everybody else. It looked terrible. Yeah. It looked really terrible.
Yeah, I guess that's when you look at it, I mean, being that you're a man of God and you're a religious person, does part of you feel like you pulled it in somehow or some sort of, I guess, I don't know, how do you reconcile all this stuff happening to you? I guess, but part of me would think that part of you thinks, I don't know, you know, sometimes when bad stuff happens to you, you kind of think, what did I do to deserve this? Is there any part of you that sort of feels...
I think it's humbled me. I reflect back really well. I look at the whole thing and I mean, you know, we haven't got to the point where it came out on the TV. You know, I know we're talking broadly around it, but I mean, this thing, I got a call from a journalist, and this was like a few hours before this was going to hit the media, and said, and they put an ad, some sort of a leader on TV, a politician with a gold ring, and it was my gold ring. I saw it, and I've gone, holy shit, that's me.
Here in the Philippines?
No. Seriously. Mate, we just go to whenever I want to, but it's actually better because they dance on top of the bars and they take up everything.
You can see Dickson's unmistakable gold ring that he wears regularly.
This is going to be splattered all over Australia. We'd just gone through the 2 weeks, going back, I think 3 weeks beforehand, of where the ABC had splattered us. And it was pretty nasty what they did, the way they cut and pasted the story.
Let's just clear up the timeline so that no one loses track of what's happening. So we're in we're in September of 2018.
That's when we went to America.
You went to America. All this footage was taken of you.
Yep.
And all the, I guess, embarrassing stuff has taken place. Now you're back home and your target or your eyes are locked on the election, which is coming up
100%.
the following year. You've kind of put this trip out of your mind.
Forgotten about it.
Yep. And now you've gone through Christmas, you've gone through Easter, you're coming up, it's just about April 2019 and you've got...
I'm travelling back and forth up and down the east coast of Australia, meeting and greeting people. Malcolm Roberts and I used to do road trips together all the time. I mean, I just focused on the game.
Life's flying, nothing really, you're not a single mind thinking about this time in America.
Not at all.
And then where does that oh shit moment happen where you think something is going?
The oh shit moment happened when we got a letter from Al Jazeera from Doha in Qatar, and I need to explain what that country is. Many people probably never heard of Qatar.
The Qatar of today is a fabulously wealthy country for its small size. And with that wealth also comes enormous global influence and power. And as a result, I would argue that Qatar is by far the most overpowered country in the 21st century world, with a level of influence ranking it as a middle power alongside states that are many, many times larger than it.
Qatar is one of the wealthiest countries in the world. They produce the most amount of gas on the planet. They're run by the royal family. They don't really have a parliament. The royal family runs the government. They run Al Jazeera. It's one of the biggest media outlets in the world. I mean, you start to ask yourself, how did Qatar get involved with Steve Dickson, One Nation in Queensland? You know, I know we produce gas. That's something we've got similar with Qatar. That's about it. But I just want to put this into context in people's minds. I don't understand how that came about, but it did. They were involved. We are running in the election campaign, and off we're running along. So I'm sorry about digressing a little bit, but I just want to fill the gaps in the middle.
We'll get into that, because that is a key part of what I want to go through, is the why, where, and how, and who. But I'm trying to just to finalise, I guess, this chapter of your life from the human side of this story, because I think that's what's missing with all this political stuff, is 100%. At the end of the day, there's humans involved. There's wives and children. There's friends and family. Me even not knowing you, watching this stuff, I feel terrible for you. And, there's also that part of you that goes, what an idiot. And then there's the part of you that humanises the situation and then thinks, geez, if I had a hidden camera on me 24 hours a day, how much shit would I be in? So the thing is that I want to know what that sinking feeling was. When was that? You got this letter from Qatar, and what did that say?
We got this letter from Qatar, and it was there was a number of questions in there that they'd thrown to us. And Pauline got the same letter, James got the same letter, I got it, but I must have got it first. Anyway, I've got in touch with James, said, listen, this is what's happened. He said, listen, just sit on that for a minute. I'll get in touch with Pauline. We had a conference over the phone about it, and we read through this stuff, and that's where the bomb actually dropped, where we knew, because I phoned Rodger Muller straight away. Obviously, he's not answering the phone any longer. It's just everything's gone solid. Gun Rights Australia disappeared off the internet. Mate, everything's just gone.
Backed up and left.
Yeah, well, they pulled up the shutters. Anyway, we are at this point where letters arrived, got in touch with Pauline and James, and we discussed it. And Pauline said, we've got to get in touch with the AFP and also ASIO because this is political interference. That's the crust of it. That's the legislation. Somebody probably should have gone to jail for 20 years, but pushing that to the side, and we can discuss that a bit later. When I saw this, I thought, shit, this is just unbelievable. I don't know where this has come from. It just blew me out of the water. So we had to go through the process.
So what did the letter say?
I'm sorry, I haven't got it in front of me. It's in the book. It's all confidential. You can't talk to anybody about it. You can't do anything about it. I think there was 15 or 20 different questions. Can you clarify this? Can you talk about this?
Let's have a look at it.
Yeah, I think it should be there. It's probably up towards the back of the book, I would imagine.
Oh, here it is.
There we go.
Yep. I'll read it from here. Yeah, we got it just at the same time. So I'll read it from here. Al Jazeera Network head. I'll put it on the screen. So it's got the letterhead of the Al Jazeera Network and their address. Al Jazeera's investigative unit is in the final stages of preparing 2 documentaries concerning the pro-gun lobby in the United States and its interactions with Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party in Australia. The investigative unit is part of Al Jazeera Media Network, an international television network which broadcasts its programs around the world. As part of our research for these programs, an undercover investigator infiltrated parts of the US gun lobby and, over a 3-year period, observed their activities. Undercover investigators also observed the activities of Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party in Australia as members of the party prepared for meetings with officials from the US gun lobby, and also as representatives of Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party visited the United States and attended a series of meetings with the members of the US gun lobby in Washington, D.C. and in Fairfax, Virginia. We are aware that, as the leader of the Queensland branch of Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party and a candidate for the Senate in the upcoming federal elections in Australia, you were involved in meetings described above. It is our intention to broadcast the details of these activities, including comments made by you in our 2 scheduled programs in March 2019.
That's it.
From that letter, it's hard to really know what you're going to be coming. I mean, at that point, what was going on in your mind at this point? Were you shitting yourself? Were you worried?
I'd never heard of Al Jazeera. Didn't know who they were. I've never, ever heard of them. Heard of the ABC, know our TV stations here. I've had nothing to do with overseas media. Heard of CNN, but Al Jazeera, didn't know anything about it. We didn't know what was going to come out. Had no idea.
So when it did come out, were you watching it like the rest of the world?
Absolutely.
Just sat in front of the couch?
Absolutely. I've sat in front of it, watching it with my wife, with my 2 kids. Pardon me. I start to get a little bit emotional about it. I'm sorry, because what this did to my wife, to my family, to everybody I know. It really fucking pisses me off, and I'm sorry about swearing, but I mean, to have people come into your home to mislead you, it's basically like leading you to the slaughter, knowing what they're going to do, and they just splatter you all over the world. I mean, we got more media than the guy who killed the people in the mosque in New Zealand, which it frustrates me in one respect for many, many different reasons, that if I was a drug dealer or if I was a child trafficker or if I did anything that was unethical or anything that was criminal, I could understand that. You know, go after them, get them, prosecute them. I'd back you 100%, but I didn't break a law. I didn't do anything wrong. I went to a strip club. I made a fool of myself. I was drunk. I think I was drugged. I'm not trying to make any excuses. I went to a strip club and it was filmed undercover. And as you eloquently put it before, I mean, get most blokes going to a strip club and see what happens. But to sit beside your wife and to watch this stuff unfold.
What did your wife say? What did Deb say while she was watching it?
She was shattered. She was absolutely shattered. I mean, Deb knew that I went to a strip club because I ring my wife every day. And whenever I go away, I ring Deb. You know, we've just got that relationship. I mean, whenever we leave our house, when we tell each other we love you, because you don't know. I've got friends that have gone away, driven away in a car, mate, never come home. These things happen in life, and I think about that. You know,
was she angry at you? Like, was she
wasn't, I believe she should have been. You know, for being such a fool for letting this happen. But the thing about it is Deb's got a really good nose for bullshit artists. She normally picks them up really quickly, and you know, these people come into her house, and I'm not putting any blame on Deb at all. It's just she was disappointed in herself that she didn't pick it up.
Yeah,
she's very, very astute with human nature, and none of us picked it up, mate. These people were genuine as the day as long as we thought, but they weren't. You know, and that was the lighting of the fuse. You know, when they came into our house, when they did what they did, and getting back to the strip club in particular, I lost my shit totally. I was buckled at the knees. I was in my shower, in the fetal position on the floor, letting the water run over me, mate, crying, praying to God. And I just couldn't sleep for weeks. For weeks. I had to get medication from my doctor to be able to sleep. But again,
was it the embarrassment or what was the actual?
I couldn't do anything. There was I had no arsenal to fight this. You know, how do you fight world media? How do you fight it when everybody out there, every media outlet in the world was telling the same story? And we all know what media is like these days. They don't fact check. They don't ask you. You know, it would have been really nice. And I don't think I could have done it at the time anyway. I think I just mentally totally lost it. You know, like I took the hit for the party, you know, because we were in the election cycle at that particular stage. What do? You know, I'm practiced enough in politics to know, mate, I was on the nose for the whole country, for the whole world. And somebody had to take the bullet, and I did.
Were you and Pauline friends? Like
very good friends.
Like
Pauline would
at
come
that
and stay
point,
at our house.
And so then for that having to resign and having to have her stand out in front of the media and say we're not like what, you know, Steve's behaviour was unacceptable, and
100%.
did that cut?
I have always spoken very highly of Steve Dickson, but the footage I saw last night cannot be ignored or condoned. I am both a mother of 3 boys and the only female leader of a political party in this country. I wouldn't tolerate my own children behaving this way towards women, and I cannot and will not condone my own candidates dealing with women in this fashion either.
But I didn't like it, but what else would you do at that particular stage? You know, she's the leader of the party in Australia. I think she had to do what she had to do. I think I had to do what I had to do at the time because there was candidates right across the country. We were looking at pulling 6 Senate seats across the country. We would have had the balance of power in the Australian government, and, you know, would immigration be the way it is today? Would, you know, so many things be the way they are today in Australia had that not have happened? You know, they're the questions that I think people need to start to ask themselves. You know, do I regret that I let myself get into that position? 100%. You know, it was devastating for me, for my family, every bit of it. Am I embarrassed by it? Absolutely. Have I come out of the other side of it? To a point I have, only because of my wife. I think if my wife wasn't here, I would have shot myself. It was just that simple. I never saw any way out of this. I could not see any light. I thought my life was over.
Do you, I guess, talking about you and your faith and being a religious person, and I've had this conversation with someone else recently about being forgiven and forgiving yourself. Do you have that conversation about saying, Steve, like, I've got to, you've got to just look forward, or how do you actually just say, okay, it's just happened,
No, I've given my life totally to God. Where He's going to lead me into the future, and I don't know where that is. I really don't know where that is, but that's where I'm going at the moment. And I mean, I've stuffed up once severely badly in my life. Was it an accident? No, it wasn't an accident. It was premeditated. It was done on purpose. It was done with a mission to take out one nation. That's what I believe. Who done it? There's only a few people that could have benefited from it happening. It's very, very straightforward. I mean, it was either one of the major parties, because they're the ones who benefit. When you have two major political parties who preference each other, when they hate each other more than anything on this planet, you've got problems. And I'm not trying to flick anything to the side or cast blame and aspersion, but I'm just dealing with the facts. Who spends $3 million coming after some bloke called Steve Dickson?
Well, your name's not even in that letter. It's Pauline Hanson.
Oh, no, that's one of them. But
what I'm saying is, like, the target in this letter is clearly the political party, not necessarily Steve Dickson.
100%.
So it's definitely politically motivated. There's no doubt about it. It's there to remove one nation. And if you're saying that, what could have been, and one nation was going to stand in the way of a lot of these things, it's just it's quite a remarkable political story. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this in Australian politics, really, when you think about how long range and how conniving and how detailed this plot was, and effective, I got to say as well, because it really did hurt.
Absolutely. Well, it hurt me, and I've not recovered from it. I'll be brutally honest. I mean, my employment opportunities, they're pretty ordinary. People look you up on the internet whenever you go for a job these days, and you see Steve Dickson at a strip club. I can't see everybody wanting to employ me. I've worked with a number of people. I do consulting work at the moment, and it's going okay. But I kind of regret that it's happened, because I think I could have contributed a lot to this country, and I'll still do a little bit from behind the scenes, and I'm not about to give up. And as I said, I'm going to go wherever God sends me, and that's the real truth in my life. I mean, I'm blessed to be alive. I think He helped get me through it, besides my wife, my family, a lot of good friends. But, to have that happen to anybody, I would ask anybody who even watches this program, think about people coming into your home, misleading you, telling you that there's something that they're absolutely not. They know, and it's all about the almighty dollar. This is about money. It's not about anything else. Everybody does things for a reason. People in this case, they did it because they were paid to do it. They were undercover liars for hire, and they work for an organisation now that is tied up with Hamas. I mean, I could really go off the rails with this, and I won't do that for your interview, but I think a group of people that support terrorism around the world, and they're still allowed to operate in our country, I think the government needs to ask themselves some questions about it. I'd also ask government representatives, why weren't they prosecuted with political interference? The legislation is there to do that.
Well, that was my next question. Legally, is there any legal grounds for anything in this whole matter, that, or is it just a case of no one wanting to take it on?
I don't know why I laughed at that, because it's just the hypocrisy of the whole thing. Like, I dealt with the AFP on this right through to me writing the end of the book, and they were still going through it at that particular stage. But the letter I got from them, I can't show anybody. Not allowed to. It's illegal for me to do so. Their findings pretty straight out were, you can't prosecute a royal family anywhere in the world. They're beyond prosecution. That's the real truth. I didn't know that, but that's a fact of life. But when it gets down to legislation about political interference, when you pay somebody to interfere in an election, legislation's really, really clear. It's 10, 15, 20 years jail time. If this was the Greens, if it was the Liberal Party or the Labor Party, this would be a totally different story altogether. people would have been prosecuted, people would have gone to jail. It probably would have been one of the biggest stories ever to happen in politics in this country. I still think it is. I think it's terrible the way that this has gone through. But
you couldn't get a suppression order before it was released or something?
We actually looked at doing that, but it wasn't going to happen.
Right.
It wasn't going to happen. I mean, Pauline's got some very good lawyers. I think they had a look at it, but we went down the path of believing the system, the AFP, ASIO. I mean, it's ironic we're having this interview today because you may have seen in the last 3 or 4 days there's an Australian federal politician who's been leaking confidential information to another government, and it was in 2018, believe it or not. And I just thought how ironic that was. They're not being exposed. They know who it is. None of us know. So you've got somebody who is actually a parliamentarian who has leaked, military sort of information to a foreign power, and we're not allowed to know who it is. But Steve Dickson, who went to a strip club, got splattered all over the world, and he's the most horrible person in the world. And they tried to make out, and I'm probably digressing a little bit, they tried to make out that we were trying to change gun laws to allow automatic and semi-automatic weapons. That never happened. That's a fantasy in Rodger Muller's mind.
Well, the background of that whole documentary is the Port Arthur massacre.
Exactly. I mean, the way I saw it, and I mean, we all see different things when we watch something happen. I think they tried to make out that I was giving guns to people who murdered the children at Sandy Hook in America. I'd never been to America before I went there with James Ashby, with Rodger Muller. I'd never been to the United States. And I mean, am I going to give guns to anybody who's going to shoot somebody? No, I'm not anyway. That's never going to happen. But that's how they portrayed me to be. I mean, I was disgusted. And some of the stuff that was written online about my wife, about myself, I mean, my wife went to a shopping centre. She was abused, absolutely abused at a shopping centre by a gutless LNP person who I would love it to have been me. I would have gone and knocked the fucking bastard out. And I'm sorry about swearing, but when people come after my wife and my family, I get a little bit upset. And I'm sorry, I apologise for swearing, but that to me, they're the crunch points in my life. Like she didn't deserve that. She's one of the nicest people in this world. I feel honoured to be married to her, and for her to go through this sort of stuff, that was just wrong. And I hold those bastards absolutely responsible, because without them doing what they did, none of that would have happened. Deb doesn't deserve that. My kids don't deserve that. All of my friends, they don't deserve what happened either. I just think it was unscrupulous. It was politically motivated. And it saddens me that it's been let go in this country we call Australia. I mean, this is my home. This is your home. And, I'm very patriotic about Australia. I'll fight for my country if I've got to, but I don't like where my country's going and how it's being manipulated, and those who are manipulating, they're still in power.
They say, sometimes these things happen, to reframe that when bad things happen, to reframe it instead of why did this happen to me, why did this happen for me? Yeah. Do you think that maybe that you've grown and developed and there's positives that have come out of it for you, whether it be with your understanding of who you are, the understanding of the importance of your wife, the understanding of, I guess, who your enemies are in this world? Has there been positives?
I've had a lot of positive things come out of it. I mean, to me, my family is the most important thing in the world. My belief in God it's super important to me, but I really advise anybody out there, love your wife, love your family, keep it as close to as you can, because you don't know when that pitfall's coming to you. You don't know when that car accident's coming. You don't know when a calamity is coming, because you could lose them the next day. And I could have easily have lost my wife, but I admire her so much because she stood by me. And I feel like I'm the luckiest bloke in the world, to be brutally honest, for something as bad to happen to you, but then to have that demonstrated to me, like, how lucky am I? I've been married for 38 years and I think my wife is beautiful. We're getting older, of course, but she's the most beautiful woman in the world, and I just admire her more than anything else on the planet.
In the book, you've mentioned her a lot. You mentioned her a lot today. Obviously, she's your rock.
She is my rock.
It's such a cliche, but she definitely seems to be such an amazing person. I've seen there's a few photos in her of her. She seems lovely, and I think that we don't appreciate the value of things like partners and marriages and people, I guess, whether it be just the people that are closest to you to support you through these tough times, because that's where you get your strength. And I can tell that from what you've said anyway, that without those people closest to you, this could have ended a lot worse.
I'd be dead.
Yeah, that's a brutal thing to say, but
well,
I mean,
it's the truth. I mean, I've never understood the idea of suicide, but you calculate it in your mind. You know, I know I was laying there and I had nowhere to go, you know, and I'll be brutally honest with you. You go through the mathematics in your head, go, well, where does my life go from here? You know, I brought dishonor upon my family. I brought dishonor upon all the people I know. People think extremely badly of me now. I can't recover from this. There's no way that I'm going to recover from this. And I'd done this in my mind. I'm going downstairs to my gun safe to get my gun out. I'm going to walk out in front of the media and I'm going to shoot myself in the fucking head straight in front of them. And they would have got everything they wanted then. They would have had exactly what they wanted. And I think that's the thing that really, really concerns me. Nobody ever looks at the collateral damage that they cause. And I mean, Tracy Grimshaw, you know, the way she spoke on TV about my wife, she said, how could that woman ever stay with that man?
I mean, if you were his wife, would you stand by him?
You have no idea of the bond that they have. And she trusts her husband. And I'm not going to say any different. It's not my place to say.
I mean, she's got no understanding of the love that I have for my wife and vice versa. She's got no understanding of my
Did she say that on TV?
She said that on national TV in front of my wife, in front of Australia.
Wow.
And I was disgusted in her. And I remember Pauline asking her, because I watched some of this stuff last night, and I just don't like watching it, to be honest. I look at it as the worst part of my life. But, you know, to watch Pauline do the interview with Tracy Grimshaw, and Pauline was crying because she was emotionally affected and, you know, she felt betrayed, I can imagine, to a point, because I'd gone to a strip club and I regret it right now. But she said to Pauline, Pauline, you know, why do you do this? You know, why do you run for politics? And Pauline said why she does. And Pauline asked her question. She said, well, Tracy, how did your station get this footage? How did it come about? And she said it was a leak, Pauline. It was leaked to us.
Al Jazeera is saying they never gave you permission to actually film that.
Because they were leaked to us, we certainly didn't pay for them. We covered that last night. You watched our show last night, and so you know that we didn't pay for them.
That's what you said.
It was a leak.
But you didn't get permission from Al Jazeera to actually...
Well, that's what happens with leaks, Pauline. That's what happens with leaks.
Well, I don't think the Qatar government leaks stuff out really easily. You know, I think they would have probably had this under lock and key. You know, that's their gig. It's their story. They paid $3 million for it.
A leak is kind of funny when you think they sent it to you. It's not a leak. It's not like a leak. It's like they sent it to you.
You've got to look at the context of it, because if it wasn't a leak, they're going to jail.
Anyone that's ever had anyone that's ever been involved or connected to someone who's harmed themselves always just wishes that they could somehow communicate to them that it actually isn't that bad. Like it seems like it's so bad to the person, but to the people around them, they're like, we just wish you could see that, you know, we still love you. We still, you know, care for you, that there's still life to be lived. There's still great things in this world. So to get to that really dark place.
Mate, take me there. Let's do it.
So let's have a look at when you were sitting on the couch, and I want to run through this.
We were actually sitting on our bed, at the front of our bed. Our bed is in front of a big TV. So Deb and I and our kids, my son and my daughter-in-law, were sitting on the end of the bed. And it's really funny. There's a whole lot of things starting to flow back to me, because we didn't leave our house for 6 months. That's real. Think about that. I'm a bloke that's out every day, living out of a suitcase, and mate, I'm not leaving the house.
From this moment?
From that moment, didn't leave the house. We had to get our kids to sneak in through the property behind us. We're on acreage. They had to sneak in through the property over the back. But I rang the guy, Lloyd, and asked him to bring bread and milk over.
Yeah.
I mean, we had the world media on our front doorstep. It wasn't little. They had fucking moonlights like on the highway out in our front, at the front of our property. We were 50 metres from the road. That's how far our property set back, thankfully.
There's no law against that?
I can do whatever they like. They're no
It's
law against
unreal.
this either by the looks of it.
So talk us through it. So this intro music starts rolling, Al Jazeera, and you start seeing these things. What was the reaction in Deb?
Deb was shattered. I was shattered. I didn't understand what was going on. My mind had just basically gone blank. I'd lost everything when a TV program came on. I mean, they were the bits and pieces in this program. They were talking about, one bit that was of me, talking about I've done more Asians than what I know what to do with. That, as I recall, but
it's something like that. But how does your wife take that? I mean, even though she's going to be a stand by her man kind of wife, I mean, it's still confronting. Even when I saw that,
it's terrible. But see, the fortunate thing is Deb and I have been married for 38 years, and she knows me, and she knows the history of my life. When I was a young man, and I'm talking 15, 16, 17, I went and lived in the Philippines with my dad. My mum and dad got divorced. And Deb had actually told Rodger Muller and this other lady, because I had to go and take a phone call when they were at our house. And Deb talked to them about my life, a whole lot of things that I'd done. And she'd mentioned that I'd lived in the Philippines and I dated a movie star, a whole lot of stuff. And I did. I sowed my oats, I suppose is the way to put it. When I lived in the Philippines, I found out what
it's all
was about. Yeah, I did. I'm a young fellow growing up, and this is back in between 78 and 82. And Marcos was running the country, and my mum and dad had got divorced, and I went with my dad, and I lived in the Philippines. And that's what that was referring to. It's not me shagging any women while I've been married to my wife. It was referring back to when I lived in the Philippines and full of piss and bad manners and probably on drugs at the time or being drugged. I've carried on about this, and they've used that snippet.
Yeah.
So to make me look like I'm shagging Asian women all the time. Well, no, I'm not. I meant no disrespect to Asian women by any means, and a drunken idiot that talks like that, I probably deserve what I got for it, but you kind of wouldn't expect that to be spread all over the world.
Did you, while you were watching it, did you wait till the end? Did she break down during?
I think we all did.
Yeah.
I think we all did. I personally was gutted. I was gutted for Deb, for her having to sit there and go through this.
Yeah.
I never knew this was coming. I didn't see it coming. I mean, yes, I went to a strip club, so I take that responsibility. But, this stuff it's just insane. Deb was impacted so badly. We watched that. The kids left and went home, and I don't know what they were thinking. They were standing by me. Deb knew that I went to a strip club because, as I said to you earlier, I let her know pretty well everything that I do. I got nothing to hide from her. 38 years of marriage is a lot. You double that, it's longer than I've been alive, basically, if I double the 38. I trust Deb, and I know Deb, and, she's the love of my life, always will be, but it doesn't take away what the opinion is of everybody else in Australia, and the words.
But did she never really get angry at you or scream at you or yell at you or tell you you're an asshole?
She cried and she cried and she cried and I cried, and I think we were both devastated. I suppose my saving grace is that I actually told her that I'd been to a strip club when I was in America at the time, so it wasn't new that I'd been there. And after she'd seen the first stitch up on the ABC,
seeing your husband groping chicks and yelling out of the car and stuff, she had to have had that upset.
The word disappointment would be an understatement. She would have had to have been absolutely bloody furious. But I think her anger was separated into, I can't believe that you've been stupid enough to allow yourself to get into this position, of which I take full responsibility for that. I think she was angry at the media for how they portrayed it. And I'll continue on what I'm saying. She saw what happened in those 2-hour interviews with the ABC that Al Jazeera had put together and put out before the world, and she saw what they did. They cut and spliced things. She knows me. My life is, I would give it for her any day of the week. So we've got a really, really good relationship. But to see this splattered in front of the world, it was ugly. I'm not underestimating what it did to her, how it impacted upon her. It was a horrible thing to see happen to my wife. I was devastated, And I can't put into words how devastated Deb was. She would have just been so upset, and she was so angry with Tracy Grimshaw for saying the words that she said there as well. Like, how could his wife stay married to him? She should leave him. I mean, that was pretty terrible, but
did she ever, was that ever an option, or was that ever a discussion?
Not that I saw, but she only told me recently that, she considered in her mind what I'd considered in my mind, and that was taking my life. And she never told me that until just recently. I was probably way too absorbed in myself, in my self-pity, in the way that I was feeling. I felt like I was a useless human being at that point in time. I mean, we watched the program. It was terrible. Neither of us could sleep. I think we both just laid in bed with our eyes open, knowing we were living in a nightmare. Without being able to just close our eyes and go to sleep. Couldn't do it. And that's where I was hatching the plot at that particular time about, I'm going to take my life. And I just, it is so, I suppose, raw to reach down with something that I've just tried to push aside for a number of years now. This is back in 2018, 2019.
I'm sick of it. Absolutely sick of it. Kevin Rudd goes to a strip joint. You've got Craig Thompson using the credit card of the unions in a brothel. You've had corruption. You've had Eddie Abid. You'd had pedophiles. You'd had everything. But they just sail through it. No, let's give Pauline Hanson a kick in the guts.
Have you said this to Steve Dickson? Have you said this to him? Did you say this to him last night? You'd have been entitled to.
No, I didn't.
Why not?
He's bashing himself around enough. You have no idea, and I'm concerned for that man too. I've copped it more than once, and I keep getting up, and I'll have another go.
It's terrifying what you can do in your mind as a human being. Like, I was working out the strategy of how I was going to go down and get the gun, how I'm going to load the gun, how I'm going to play this and go outside and shoot myself in front of the media. And I was ready to go, there was nowhere else for me to go in my life. It was done. It was over. I mean, I felt like I was doing the right thing by Deb. She's not going to have to pay any more price for this. That's how stupidly you think when you're in that situation. I mean, to be driven to that point and then to actually contemplate how you're going to do it, that's the really scary part to me, because you can calculate plans of building a house, whatever it may be. That's what it was like. I was just going through in my head, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to go about it, and it'll all be over. I don't have to worry anymore.
It's almost like that style of thinking was almost like to do it, to have that sort of thought, and that it must be such hatred towards the media at that point to just want to say, here, have me. You know what I mean? Or,
I think I hated myself. I think I hated the media. I think I hated everything, because I just knew my life was over. It was done. I mean, this is, and I'm going to refer to an old guy who rang me up, and this is moving forward a little bit after that event. He actually got in touch with me, and I know this bloke pretty well, and he said to me, Steve, you're trying to resolve a short-term problem with a long-term solution, and that means by killing yourself, that's forever. And he said, basically, this situation, it's going to go by. It will go by. And my oldest son said to me, Christian, he said, Dad, he said, had you have taken your life, I would have never have forgiven you, and I don't want that to be how I remember my father. He said, I love you dearly, and, now I've got an 8-month-old grandson that is Christian's child now, and Theo is the greatest part of my life. I love nothing but sitting down and being stupid and grabbing him and blowing bubbles on his belly and just, getting him to react and do stuff, and it's the greatest joy of my life. But had I not have gone through that or got through that with Deb's help, with that old fellow's help, with my son's help, I wouldn't have got to experience my grandson. And, things could have happened that he may not have had a grandson, Who knows where that would have led my family. I mean, I look back at that thought that I had and I thought, you unreasonable bastard, you should never have thought like that. Not only have you got us into this position, you've got yourself into a position where you're going to kill yourself, and you never even thought about the flow-on effects that Deb will face, my kids would face, my future grandson would face. I never thought about any of that. I was just so focused on, I'm going to kill myself. I can't go anymore. I can't do anything anymore. So,
are your parents still alive?
My dad passed away at 57. He was a diabetic. He ran in the Olympics. He carried the Olympic flame. Hard worker, mate. He was a farmer. Moved to Brisbane in 1968, bought a caravan park, and that's where I learnt the industry. They had one of the biggest caravan parks in Queensland, my dad and my uncle at Carina.
But do you think his memory of, or like the memory of him, does that play in the same sort of thought? Is like, even though he's not with you, but like, I think when you think about your part in that chain, when you're considering these drastic measures,
I never even thought about my dad. I was looking for a way out. I can't talk for anybody else who has attempted to take their life, taken their life, or gone down the path that I went down. I mean, I think everybody is different. Different circumstances affect different people, but mate, I was dead serious. I just couldn't see any daylight. It was just all dark. Everything was dark. In my mind at that time, there was no other solution. This was the solution, the best solution, fastest way out. Nobody's going to suffer anymore. I'll finish it. That's what I thought. But to anybody out there that even considers going down that path, please don't. Whatever you are, whoever you are, wherever you are, the sun's going to come up tomorrow, and your problems could be just like mine, a short-term problem, and you don't want to take that long-term solution because it's the worst thing you could ever do. Love your family, and really, really look after them.
Yeah, good words, man.
Maybe.
Who is Rodger Muller? Let's break this guy down. So is that his real name?
I don't know. To this day, I don't know. I believe it is. I mean, they introduced him as Rodger Muller on national TV by Al Jazeera and the ABC, and also the current affairs show. So, mate, obviously, it probably is Rodger Muller. I know a fair bit about Rodger Muller because I've done a fair bit of research into him. I mean,
well, tell us a bit about him. I mean, I tried to have a little dig.
I'm going to say it again nationally. He's a charlatan. He's a liar. In my mind, he's corrupt because to come into my house and lie to me about who he is for a start, that covers all those issues.
Rodger, you're not a robot. Obviously, you're a human being, and so you have to form relationships with people as part of what goes on. How did, over time, you feel about the One Nation people you were dealing with? How did you feel when you knew it was going to come out and they were going to be crushed by it, for lack of a better word? How did all that play out for you?
Oh, well, it's hard. And at the end of the day, nearly everybody that I met throughout the project were quite nice people, and you do form a bond because that's part of the job and just, I think, human nature. So, yeah, it was a difficult thing to watch the process.
When you lie, you're never going to stop lying, and that's the person he is. I know that he was involved in some sort of corruption down at Shoalwater where a company had been ripped off for, I think, $180,000, and I think his wife actually got prosecuted for that. But, there's a whole lot of stuff about Rodger Muller. Rodger Muller needs to be looked at. Has anybody ever asked the question, who is Rodger Muller? What does Rodger Muller do? What's his real background? I think that needs to come out in front of the world. I mean, he was put down as Mother Teresa, a guy who's unfolded this terrible, terrible scheme that nobody ever got prosecuted for, nobody got a ticket for. I mean, as much as a speeding ticket or drunken disorderly, nothing happened. I mean, it was all about politics. That's the real truth. I took it very personally because when you get to the stage of going to shoot yourself, I think you take things
pretty personally,
real personally. I take it personally when my wife is treated and had the wool pulled over her eyes by these very same people who were invited into our own home. And I know I harp on about our own home, but your home is your sanctity. That is the place where people you trust and believe in and, they're part of your family. You invite those people into your home. I invited these people into my home, and it was like letting leprosy into my home.
Well, vampires can't get into your house without being invited, right? So that's the thing, isn't it?
I can't change it.
Yeah.
But the thing I've learnt from it all is that, You just don't trust people as easy as I used to. I find it very, very difficult to trust people these days. I probably go to the nth degree to research people I have anything to do with.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to ask you about when it comes to paranoia, because I know when I contacted you about coming and talking to me, when you called me, I look back on that phone call in hindsight, and I think you were checking me out. I think part of you was, was nervous that I was some sort of operative or some, had some other intention other than just having a chat.
Well, I was called a traitor to my country. That hurts me. It really, really hurts because I love my country. I love my country more than anything. I mean, we're all immigrants originally, but, we all become Australians. That's the way the world is. And it gets to the racism card too. I mean, I'm not a racist. I can tell you now about immigration. We brought in 1.8 million people between 2022 and 2023. We've got a housing problem in Australia where people can't live in houses. They're living in tents under bridges and they're living in cars in car parks. And our government didn't see that. Of course they knew we've got a problem, but it's a big Ponzi scheme to bring people into our country. So
how does that explain that? How does that work for the government? Who makes money out of that?
The government makes money out of that. People, they normally bring wealthy people into our country, and that's how the system works. I mean, why would you bring in 1.8 million people in that 22-23 year into Australia when you know housing is a real big problem? Builders are going broke, hand over fist. You cannot supply the demand. Rent is going through the roof. Working people are living in tents under bridges. I'm not making any of this up. This is all fair, absolutely fair income. Cost of living is out of control. There are so many things going on in our country, but the immigration thing, that's what I was talking about when I was talking about immigration, when these people have added as well. I mean, we don't have the hospitals, we don't have the roads, we don't have the schools, we don't have the facilities to be able to look after more people. When you do, bring more people in. But until you do, would you do it in your own home? You've got carrying capacity. You can only do so much. I mean, if you're going to do things, do them well. Don't do them badly. Don't create a problem for the future.
So when one nation, or I guess any political, any politician stands up and starts to push back against immigration, they're instantly branded a racist.
Well, not anymore. They're all doing it now.
Right, okay.
They're all starting to do it now. I mean, the Labor Party is very pro-immigration as they're very pro-Palestine, but I look at what's going on in the world at the moment. The Conservatives are saying now, we've got to cut back on immigration. I mean, they're responsible for bringing a lot of people into this country too. Nobody's exempt from, taking responsibility for your actions. We all do things and we keep moving forward. Hopefully you don't make the same mistake you made the first time. You don't do it the second time. But immigration, as far as I'm concerned, is out of control. Just stop it until we get the train back on the tracks. At the moment, we don't, and we're not even looking like doing it.
What problems, like, I guess if you look at immigration as an issue, what, I guess, byproducts do you get from what other issues do you get from having this immigration issue?
It's simple, and I'll use the analogy. It's like a farmer having a paddock that will hold so many cattle and feed them. And there's so much grass, there's so much water, they can eat so much grass and they can drink so much water. There's enough, hypothetically, in a 10-acre paddock, and we'll just use that as an example, to hold 20 cattle. You put 1,000 cattle in that paddock, all the grass is eaten in a couple of days, all the water's gone, and they start dying. You've got a problem. This is the problem with immigration. In Australia, and I use the 22, 23 numbers, and they're absolutely spot on. And that's
1.8 million.
It's excess of 1.8 million, and that's a mixture of people that are coming here through, immigration visas, through student visas, through displaced people. There's a whole variety of different criteria that you cover. And
that's legal immigration?
Oh, absolutely. It's legal. It's all legal. And, there's nothing wrong with immigrating to Australia. We've all done it. This is the thing that I really want to impress upon everybody. Nobody living in this country hasn't come from somewhere else. We all have. Even the indigenous people living in this country come from Africa. Might be 50,000 years ago, but we all come from somewhere else. Us, we've all come here after Captain Cook, And, we've come from Europe, or we've come from Asia, or we've come from somewhere, but we all become Australians. That's why we come here.
Mm.
But we are hitting a tipping point now where try to get into the hospital.
Mm.
There's not even enough medication out there at the moment. I understand kids that have got ADHD, they can't get medication at the moment. There's not enough of it about.
Mm.
I mean, there is a whole lot of things. Try to get into a dentist. Drive on our roads. We are not keeping up to speed with the carrying capacity of the population that we have now. And the housing issue, it's just out of control. People can't afford to pay rent. They can't afford to buy a house. Your children and my children, I suppose my eldest son has bought a house and he's paying it off, but the next generation, they will never own houses unless their family gives it to them, unless their family is very, very wealthy and they can afford to give them a house. A young bloke starting off marrying like we probably did and having children, you're not going to be able to buy a house on a normal wage. Not going to happen.
Mm.
So that's a problem.
And then it leads to crime. So with people not being able, I guess, when you get homelessness, you get crime, and you get pressure on the system, you get crime. What is your, I guess, opinion about youth crime at the moment? Because I know you've got some strong opinions about that.
Youth crime is out of control. I mean, it gets down to legislation. It's not the judges. It's not the coppers. It's politicians. The politicians have got to have the right legislation to give to the judiciary to say, it's not a maximum sentence. It's a minimum sentence. I mean,
So is it just being harder on crime in your book?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think it gets down to the family as well. Empower the family, because I just use that as an example. I think kids are out of control. They know what they can get away with. They're walking away from their families. And I think it all gets down to the times we're living in, like kids are turning against their parents, brothers and sisters are turning against each other. And we never saw that any more than we saw through the COVID period. And I mean, we probably can't go through this interview without bringing up that lovely little thing that affected so many of us in the world. It changed everything. COVID changed everything.
Yeah, there's a chapter in the book that I had to skip actually because I didn't have the time, but there was a chapter on COVID. What was your sort of take on that? Give us a brief on your thoughts on COVID.
My take on COVID, it was created in the Wuhan lab. It got out. Don't know how it got out, if it was on purpose or by mistake. I called that out a long time ago. I said it on Sky News. But it's real. COVID's real. It's out there. But as far as the jab is concerned, I've got to call it that. Otherwise, this thing won't go to the screen, mate. They'll ban you everywhere. The jab, it's got a lot to be desired as far as I'm concerned. I push medical cannabis, as I talked about earlier in this interview, and I remember sitting down with Jeanette Young. She's now the Governor of Queensland. She was the Chief Health Officer. I was on the Health and Ambulance Committee in the Queensland Parliament, and I was pushing medical cannabis. And she said to me straight out, she goes, well, we'll never be approving this. It'll take a minimum of 10 years because we've got to go through the process. This could affect people that have got, mental health issues. It could affect pregnant women. It could affect all these different groups in our society. So we've got to test it. Then, we go to COVID. COVID's here and they're telling us it's going to kill everybody like the Black Death or the Spanish flu, which it never did. They've given everybody a forced immunisation. If you didn't get the needle, you lost your job. If you didn't get the needle, you couldn't go anywhere. If you didn't get the needle, your life was pretty well over. You're trapped in your home. That's the truth. Many, many people have died from having the needle. Many people have had side effects from having the needle. That's the real truth. And when you start to collaborate the figures about the flu and how many people died of the flu, nobody died of the flu in that period. I think it was 2020, 21, 22, but all these people were dying of COVID. Now people are dying from the flu again, and probably not so many people are dying from COVID. So I think the numbers have been cooked.
Statistics is funny business.
Just look at the mathematics. It's pretty straightforward. And I've seen lots of studies that are now starting to come out, and they're only within the last few weeks. I mean, there was a court case, one in Queensland, where the police commissioners had to resign because they mandatorily made people, you either got the needle or you lost your job. I mean, this happened everywhere.
So what happened with Craig Kelly? Like when he was in Parliament, he was speaking up about this stuff. He was bringing some of this information to bear at the time. And this is what I spoke to a politician from the Greens the other day in the interview with him, and I said that we seem to get it right after the fact. Everyone's a 2020 hindsight's 2020. At the time, though, like Craig Kelly was in Parliament. He was bringing information to bear.
I am listening to them, and I think you need to start listening to our scientists and our doctors, Craig.
Our scientist is our most senior qualified immunologist in this country, Professor
Craig.
Robert Clancy, and you are not listening to him. I'm sorry.
No worries, Craig. You're in a position of responsibility, and I think you're failing in that duty.
I'll continue to speak the truth and tell the truth.
It'd be nice if you started.
If the media
want
to misrepresent my position, I'm going to come on and I'm going to defend it, because I will not have slander and smear and said against me when the facts are incorrect.
Okay, Craig. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Do you think it was like pharmaceutical company pressure? Is this what you were saying
100%.
before about like there's the idea of money in politics?
Without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, follow the money and you'll get your answer. I mean, I know in Israel, I think it was $125 a shot because their contracts got leaked out across the world. Don't know what the Australian government paid per shot, but, you've got Pfizer that made the most money they've ever made in the history of Pfizer, and they kind of forget about their little legal problems they had with some issues where they had to pay, I think it was over $1 billion in fines, for doing the wrong thing. But I think people quickly forget thalidomide, cane toads. There's mistakes that have been made in the past. And Craig Kelly, and I'll give credit where it's due, he just wanted people to talk about it, to discuss it openly and to have a free, fair, frank conversation as you're doing with me today. But that wasn't allowed in the media.
He was marched out of Parliament. I remember seeing it. I just thought, this is wild. He's actually just trying to talk about information and get on TV and talk about stuff that there was information that he had. Now, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I just remember thinking that the conversation was shut down.
Sean, I think that's the problem with the world today. We don't get both sides of the story anymore. We get the side of the story who can pay the most money for it. And we get the story, I'll digress a little tiny bit.
Go for it.
It's like law and your opportunity to defend yourself in this country. Who can afford to defend themselves in this country? And in my case with Al Jazeera, I could have hired a lawyer and I could have taken them to court. I didn't have $3 million to burn. The Ben Roberts-Smith case cost $25 million. Do you think mine's going to be much cheaper if I took something on like that? It's not.
Well, they say you get the justice you can afford, and I'd like to think that's not the case, but I guess
it is.
You're feeling that is the case.
No, I'm not feeling it. It's statistically correct. Go and hire a barrister. For an opinion, it'll cost you $10,000. That's just an opinion. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. Go and hire a lawyer. It is big money these days, and the average person can't defend themselves. And that's where I really feel sorry for people that have been impacted by the jab. They may have side effects. They can't afford to fight this thing. Many people, when they were directed by government and they saw on the TV, if you don't get the jab, you're not an Australian. You're letting the team down. You're letting the country down. You're letting your family down. Should your family members be able to come to Christmas with you if they haven't had the needle? This was the type of language that was being portrayed by mainstream media, by governments, by pretty well all and sundry at the time. And it's now moved forward. And I'll hand at my heart, both Deb and I didn't get the needle. We both had COVID, and I'm still doing the interview with you. I had what I would call the flu for 4 days. Fevers, didn't feel so great, but I've had worse flus before in my life. We lived through it.
I've had worse hangovers.
What's changed?
Yeah, I know. This is...
Has COVID gone away?
This is why I want to do this podcast, to be honest, is because I want to talk about these things. And I think that when I go out into society and I talk to my friends and family, I'm always amazed at the viewpoints that are out there. Some that I would consider just completely naive, and some that I would consider just wildly incorrect. Like I've still talked to people who still have some really outdated ideas about certain things, whether it be the jab, whether it be immigration, whether it be about the state of the economy. So I think the conversation has to happen, and that's what this is all about.
I agree with you. But you got to have that conversation. I'm happy to be proven wrong in anything that I say. I haven't got a problem with it, mate. And the stuff with the jab, I want to be wrong. I still to this day want to be wrong, but there's too many people they're starting to drop dead.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry to say, it seems to be a bit of an epidemic. Ask among your friends.
Yeah.
Have a look around with everybody you know. People that have had cancer, it's coming back. People that have had blood clots and they've had aneurysms and mate, you name it, there's a lot of stuff out there. And I mean, the truth, it's eventually going to come to pass, but is it too late? You know, why didn't we have that open, frank conversation? Why couldn't people talk about it? You know, the ivermectin and the hydroxychloroquine, I'd like to know why they were just pushed aside and you weren't allowed to use them. And I understand the reason why was because if there was another medicine made available, you couldn't fast track these drugs that Pfizer and Co put forward. So but it's a big story and there's still a long way to go and there'll be a lot more information come out over time. And again, I hope I'm wrong with the information that's been fed to me. I really want to be wrong on this one because there's too many people involved.
Well, the money's already been made and time will just drag on, and I think it'll go, now it'll just be one of those things that there'll be people talking about it in 15, 20 years and still fighting for it and still trying to work it out. We'll wrap it up in a minute, but I'll just quickly ask you, what's your relationship like with Pauline Hanson?
But I haven't spoken to Pauline for probably 4 or 5 months. Rang up and spoke to her about 4 or 5 months ago. That's about it. Say good day. How you going?
Did you feel that they threw you under the bus at all, or do you feel any sort of bitterness towards them, or do you think they supported you? Did they handle it right?
I probably don't feel bitterness towards most people, but I got a special place in my heart for Jazeera, Rodger Muller and a few others that were involved in that process, and I think I've got every right to do that. But Pauline, I think Pauline's a pretty good-hearted person. I think she's probably starting to get a bit burnt out with politics. You can only be in there so long.
It's a tough game.
And cop, what I cop, they put her in jail. They jailed her, illegally put her in jail. There's some horrible things happen in politics.
Did James Ashby survive?
Yeah, James is, I think he's running for a seat in the Queensland Parliament. He's still Pauline's chief of staff, I understand. I haven't spoken to James for a number of months either.
Okay. And what's next for you with regards to, I guess, what you're working on? What do you, I mean, I've seen the videos, I've seen you talking about like actual issues that matter to people, like things that the day-to-day, the cost of living, the homelessness, the crime, the medicinal cannabis. What are you actually involved in now, and what's sort of your, I guess, passion at the moment, or are you sort of putting that aside for a short time? Or?
No, I'm probably doing it because it fills that niche in my life. As I said, I like helping people. I like telling the truth, and I think those things are pretty important characteristics. And I keep doing what I'm doing. I've got a reasonably good following. I think I've got about 57,000 people that follow me. I'm going to keep doing that stuff because it fills a bit of a gap in my life. Because I'm not involved in politics at this point in time. I considered running for mayor of the Sunshine Coast at the last council election, of which my son is a local councillor and he's just been elected unopposed. I mean, our family's always had a pretty good reputation. You know, I think I come from reasonably good stock. We've been pretty strong, pretty resilient, and I don't think we've done that much wrong in society, to be honest. We've helped a lot of people along the journey, but Steve Dickson's not dead yet. I'm 62 years old this year, and I'm not about to give up. You know, if you ask Steve Dickson of old or Steve Dickson here today, you know, to solve a few of the problems in our country and where we're going, I mean, I'd cancel the Olympics tomorrow. I know that probably wouldn't be favourable amongst a whole lot of people. I carried the Olympic flame in 2000. My dad carried it in 1956. I love the Olympics. I think it's great. I love sport. I used to be the sports minister in Queensland, but when you're living in a time where they can't build roads, they can't build rail, we haven't got enough staff in hospitals.
I think it seems to be always the people that seem to have to take the hit. And I look at the people that I've interviewed from government and I think it seems to be government spending, government inefficiency, government waste is actually where the money goes. And a lot of people are pissed off with politicians because they're constantly preaching to us about what we need to do. And I look at politicians and think, it's you guys. Like, that's my assessment of the whole area is I just look at it and I go, actually, it's not us. It's you. You're the ones that are taking all the money. You're overspending. And if you save some money, you're not going to give it back to us. You're going to have to pay off debt that you've accumulated, wasting it on, you know, every person out there will have some, even if it's just the fact that it costs $85,000 to fill a pothole or $900,000 to build a toilet block, or the inefficiencies in government are mind-boggling. And I think that, when you suggest us not being able to afford the Olympics, for example, I agree with the notion, but I also agree that feel, I should say, that, and I haven't got any facts and figures, but I bet there's millions and millions of dollars that could be saved or found elsewhere that the people in power just seem to, even just the expense on getting elected. I look at how much money is spent on elections.
I think it gets down to our voting patterns. I mean, many people vote the way their parents did, which is stupid. You should look at what people are, what they do, what their policies are, what the benefits are going to be to your local community. I mean, and that's right across the board. I mean, at a state and a federal government level, it's not that much different. You want to really scrutinise these people and find out what the benefits are for voting for a particular party or a particular individual, what they believe in. Where are they going? Are they taking you on the journey with them, or are you just, But
what we said before and I'm just pushing back a little bit so that I don't forget, is, okay, good example is, let's say I like this particular individual, call him Bob, and he's got all these great ideas, but he's with the Greens, let's say. Now, if I get that guy in, based on what you were saying before about the party line, I'm still going to end up getting what the Greens have. Philosophy. And if I vote for this other guy, I'm going to get him, but I'm going to get him with the Liberal philosophy or the Labor philosophy. And let's be honest, I've really got probably 3 or 4 options. If One Nation were more prevalent, there'd be that sort of fourth, or else we get independence. And I'm just kind of putting this all together for myself in thinking that in itself is where, to stay in power or to keep power or to win, you've got to sort of toe a line of some sort as well. And then we end up exactly where we started.
I think the system was constructed in such a way where individuals were elected to Parliament, and then somebody come up with this really good idea. Let's create a little bit of a Ponzi scheme where we've actually got groups of individuals that we can control, and they're going to do what we tell them to do because we won't endorse them at the next election and they're out of a job. That's the problem. I mean, the colonies, when they were originally set up, we had New South Wales and we had Queensland, and they came together and they created the Commonwealth. Because if all the states came together tomorrow and said we want to disband the Commonwealth, they could do it. That's the law. But they're never going to do that. It's not going to happen. But getting to the root of the problem, we've let this happen to ourselves. People aren't brave enough to stand up out there any longer. People don't run.
Is it a case that it's too complicated to understand for most people?
Absolutely.
I mean, look, I know that I consider myself a pretty moderate intelligence level, of a level of moderate intelligence, but I still have to get more understanding of the houses, the House of Representatives, the seats, the councillors, all the nomenclature of Parliament. And I think it shouldn't really be this. It should be something that we're either taught more about in schools. It should be something that we understand more. It shouldn't be a challenge to understand this sort of stuff. It should be something that should be simplified or explained. And that's one thing I did like about the Pauline Hanson cartoons that she's done, because a lot of that is quite educational, whether you agree with her or not. The actual premise of it is to understand what's going on in Parliament.
Right. In order to pay for your campaigns, you'll need money, and you'll get that money from donations. Yes! But remember, any donation above $14,500 needs to be disclosed.
Is that part of a solution?
I think there's a whole lot of solutions. I think people have got to educate themselves. I think the idea of it being taught in school, I think, is a really good idea, as long as you're not indoctrinating, you're teaching. And I think that's what happens in universities these days. Many people get indoctrinated. They normally go to the left at universities. That's traditional across our country. I watched your interview with Jonathan Shree, is it? I thought he'd come across as a pretty logical, sensible sort of bloke, to be honest. My opinion of him has been probably different to that. I saw your interview and I probably put him in a different set of circumstances these days. He said some reasonably intelligent stuff. But, like you said, he's part of the Greens, and is he going to go against his own group to represent people?
And I've had a lot of people tell me that interview with John was really good, and he really engaged them. And you can't, no one could really make the claim that he's not passionate about what he's doing, regardless of what you think of his policies.
Well, him and I think very similarly relating to homelessness. I mean, this is Australia. Working people living in tents, under bridges and in cars, in my mind, is unconscionable. You got to do something about that. That's probably one of my biggest drivers these days, cost of living as far as food is concerned. I just go to the shopping centre. You work it out really quick. I shop at Aldi, mate. I do the once a month thing, and Deb goes and picks up whatever she wants to get from Woolworths and Coles, the stuff in the middle. I think she's too embarrassed to come shopping with me sometimes because I buy boxes of everything at a time. And I think that comes from coming off the land. But I think, you've got to get your priorities right. And the priorities, and I'll go back to the Olympics again and I'll push the issue. Give it to another country. I'm not saying don't have the Olympics. At the moment, we just can't afford it. Let somebody else have it. The day comes again when we can afford it and people have got homes. People aren't living under tents and bridges and, food's more affordable, electricity is affordable. I just can't see them things happening anytime soon unless there is a break in the nexus of the system that we are now operating under, because it's failing. I think it's probably going to get worse. And when it starts to hit people in the hip pocket, when it starts to affect your family, that's when you start to go, I need to do something. But like Steve Dickson getting splattered all over the world, I got humbled, I got slapped, I got knocked to the ground, and it made me think about my family. It made me think about my kids, my friends who I associate with, and it made me really think about God, and they're those things that got me through, and what's going to get Australians through and what's going to get them to the next step so that their kids can buy a house or they're not living in the car in a car park of a shopping centre. And, and crime is not out of control as it is today, because it is. It's like drinking, I suppose. You understand you've got a problem. You either cut back or you keep on drinking and you kill yourself. Your liver falls apart or whatever's going to happen to you. We've got a problem at the moment in this country, and I don't know if anybody's really doing anything about it.
Well, I agree, and I think this is where I go back to what I was saying about the politicians. I think that one point that I didn't have enough time to delve into it with Jonathan enough, but really one of the things that I keep thinking about is, like, to build a house, for example, it's probably going to take you 3 or 4 years in council if you're trying to do something in one of the inner city spots. The red tape, and
it's insane.
It's insane. So again, that's a government issue. The requirements on housing, the expenses, the ridiculous requirements to build. Again, another thing that that pushes the price of housing up. Then you've got obviously the electricity costs, the fuel costs, the cost of everything that actually pushes the house pricing up. So these are all areas I think that governments could actually, and the spreadsheet that I showed Jonathan while he was here was that if you did a 4-unit townhouse development, the government makes about $500,000 out of that, and the developer makes about 150. So when you look at all the GST, when you look at all the taxes, the capital gains, the stamp duty, the government makes an absolute killing. I won't bore you with the numbers again, but I just look at it as just this noose around the average Joe's neck that really makes it hard to act, hard to produce, hard to make any money. And it all comes down to the people that we elect.
I think there's solutions to those problems too. I used to be the chairman of town planning on the Maroochy Shire Council when I was a councillor, and I understand planning really well, and I understand the impact on developers. I mean, council's fees and charges for a start, and the onerous conditions that they put on people can be way over the top, and I think it's got a whole lot worse. I think it's very friendly to the likes of Stocklands and the major developers, because they'll punch out 2,000 blocks that are 350 square metres, which are going to be slums of the future. That's the real world. That's where we're going, I believe. They don't supply enough car parking. There's no room for a kid to go out in the backyard and kick a ball. Don't think about having an animal, because those days are all gone. You can't have an animal in that small of an area. You might have a budgie. You can have a dog. It's difficult. I think big developers again, it's like big gas companies. It's like big pharmaceutical companies. They have their way with councils.
I think this has just been a great chat. I really appreciate you choosing me actually to come and talk to, because I know that your story is one worth telling, and I know that there's a lot of interest in this story, and I think I feel very honoured that you come to tell me about it all, to be honest.
Sean, I think if we can help somebody else out there who have similar situations, I don't think anybody's going to have the exact same thing that happened to me, and I wouldn't wish it upon anybody. I suppose my takeaway lines are, I hope and pray that there are brave enough politicians out in our governments of this country that will actually make sure this never happens again to anybody. I think this matter still needs to be looked at. It needs to be reasonably raked through the coals and go, well, where did the system break down? You know, how did this happen to any individual, regardless if it's Steve Dickson or anybody else? But, you know, if anybody out there is thinking about taking your life, just don't do it, eh? Don't do it, because the sun's going to come up. You got people that care about you and love you, and really, really think about that before you even consider, you know, using a gun, jumping off a cliff, whatever it may be. Just live, because you're valuable. You are a caring person, and your family's going to love you, and they're going to miss you if you do anything stupid. So just don't do it. Think about it. Worst comes to worst, give me a call. I talk to a lot of people.
Yeah, and that's great, man. I really appreciate it. And I honestly think you'd take the call too. So thanks.
I will. I mean it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks a lot for coming in. We'll wrap it up there. And
you probably won't use this, but I want to say God bless you all out there. Think about your family. Think about your loved ones. And they're the things to hold close to you these days. Money's important. You've got to pay the bills, but there's nothing more important than your blood and your flesh. And just love them. Just love them, because we're never here long enough.
Thanks, Steve.
Appreciate
your time.
No,
man.
appreciate your time.
Thanks a lot. That was great, man. I think we got there.